Hello, my name is Zahar Karetsky. I'm a transition scholar at Eindhoven University of Technology in the Netherlands. And this is Transitions Visions podcast, a podcast series about and for the sustainability transitions community. Today we're going to be talking about natural resource ownership and specifically wind ownership. As we all know, a huge part of sustainability transitions is the energy transition. And one of the key current debates in energy transition is the question of who is going to benefit from that transition and who is going to be left behind. And today we are going to look at this issue from a transitions and a political economic perspective. To discuss this, I spoke with Robert Wade, who is working as postdoc at the Technology, Innovation and Society Group at Eindhoven University of Technology, and whose whole PhD was on the exact topic of wind ownership in energy transitions. We also talked about Robert's PhD journey and what he has learned, not just content-wise, but also personally. It's a bit of a shorter one than the previous, but no less engaging, I assure you. So enjoy the episode, and I hope you come back for more next time. Robert Wade, political economist and transition scholar, as you just reminded me, postdoc at Technical University of Eindhoven. So you actually made a very compelling presentation at our group where we worked together about your research on wind and wind resources. So you've been studying and sort of looking at, actually you were kind of raising this issue of wind ownership. And can you maybe explain a little bit what the issue is with that and what are the implications of that issue?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you very much for talking with me. Very happy to share my thoughts. So my PhD research, the premise, I guess the main, or the context at least, was the energy transition and this movement from fossil fuel-based economy to one which relies heavily on renewable resources like wind, solar and geothermal. And these differ materially from fossil fuels. They're not sort of stocks that can be transported and stored, but they're flows and in flux. So there's sort of a material difference there, and that raises all sorts of problems like intermittency. But that wasn't the main focus, but rather this materiality also made me think, there's been lots of discussion and debate in the past on who owns and controls oil resources, coal resources, and this has been a really big issue. Oil rents, the OPEC oil crisis in the 70s. And I thought then, if we're now moving to an economy which is dominated by these renewable resources, what does ownership and control look like and what does it mean for these resources? So that was basically the premise guiding my research. So the implications are, I guess, it could range from the geopolitical all the way down to the micro community level interactions. I guess I dealt more with the meso and micro level, but not so much the geopolitical things. But I guess the implications go all the way down.
And can you maybe recall a little bit about what you've done, maybe in short form?
Yeah.
In Ireland.
Yeah. So in terms of my methods, you mean, or what specifically I looked at in the study?
The micro and meso.
Yeah. So basically, I was looking at, to put it in a bit of context, I first sort of had to think about, how is ownership of wind resources specifically organised? And to do this, I was basically just reading literature, and mostly actually legal literature from, a lot of the stuff was from the United States, some stuff from Germany, and even China. And so from all these, I found this concept of wind rights came up, and from these different literatures, I sort of used this concept of wind rights and extended it a bit. But basically, the idea is the growing consensus, I would say, and which I also argue, is that because you need land to harvest wind resources, then wind rights are, in a sense, tied to land rights. So this means that landowners are de facto or proxy wind resource owners. So they have a veto right over who controls the wind resource, and they are sort of like this mediating actors, key mediating actors between the developers and the resource. So that's the premise. And then what I then did on the basis of that was I examined the role of land ownership and wind energy development in the Republic of Ireland and the Netherlands, as a way of getting at these wind resource ownership dynamics in context of the energy transition.
Yeah, I've heard about these rights of wind rights, but in a context of rights of nature. Is this where it's coming from? So giving the legal rights to a river or a piece of land?
I think it's actually quite different, but could potentially be somehow linked. My understanding of rights of nature is more in a sense of extending sort of human rights to nature, whereas the rights to natural resources is very much, I would say, like within a productivist economic paradigm. So it's about it's very much about how society organizes who can take resources, who can use them. So it's very much within I would still say an anthropocentric mindset, which I think this new discourse of the rights of nature is trying to go beyond that. But it's an interesting connection, but I didn't specifically make it myself. Yeah.
And is this well studied, or is it a new strand of this literature that you're covering or looking into?
No, I would say it's not very well studied. As I said, there was all this legal literature which was looking at wind rights very much from a legalistic perspective. But in terms of social science or even economics, very little that sort of grapple with this. There has been some studies recently while I was doing my PhD. David McDermott Hughes wrote a book called Who Owns the Wind? So that's one of the key ones actually. And that was more of an anthropological study of, I think, the south of Spain. That was really interesting. And then there's another author, a researcher called Lourdes Alonso Serna from Mexico. She's done some stuff on this as well. So I would say it's and there's several other people working on it now, but it's still at the initial phase. But I hope in the next few years to sort of maybe broaden it to solar, to geothermal, and trying to expand some of the theoretical understandings of it as well.
Yeah, and could you already touched upon that. Maybe could you reiterate the kind of the looking forward, the research agenda, maybe one or two topics or even questions maybe for this type of literature?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think expanding it to other resources like solar could be really interesting, and obviously the different materiality of solar energy makes that will make it quite different. I think will make a difference. Also, the fact that you can have rooftop solar. So I think there's issues of, rights of tenants to access solar resources on the roofs. I think that's quite an interesting potential avenue. Other resources. Also, maybe more quantitative studies which try to somehow estimate the extent of resource use in certain areas as well, and tying that to ownership could be interesting. I think they're the main ones.
And from what I heard from you speaking now and also before, you have touched on the issue of socialization of wind rents. Is that so? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, exactly. So that was also an underlying sort of idea going throughout my research that, okay, if we can talk about ownership of these resources, then we can also talk about rearranging that ownership. Right. And the finding that wind rights are tied to landowners also brings the implication that it's essentially managed as a private sort of fragmented resource. So then I wanted to explore just through a thought experiment, essentially, what would community wind rights look like? What would nationalised or state wind rights look like? How would these fit in with within the general system of production of wind energy? I think some other people have talked about that too. But I do think that, especially when we look at the energy transition, there's often so many problems with communities and conflicts with developers. And one of the problems also with community energy initiatives is that they never have enough power, from the outset. There's always this sort of unequal power position. And I think socializing or granting veto rights, wind rights to communities could really tip the balance of power in the transition, and it could really look like a different energy transition if we did that.
And I immediately think of my own case study from last year, where I went to Romanian coal fields and coal mining industry, the declining coal mining industry, and nobody thinks about this, about socializing rents. Maybe you could even, Well, you built a wind farm over there instead, and then you pay the half of the or part of the rent to those people, to those laid-off workers. And what other applied sort of implications of this new direction of research are there?
Yeah, I think so. I've been trying to think about some of the of how to, I suppose, put these ideas into practice, and also who these ideas could be useful for. So I've reached out to different groups like Res Co-op, which is the European Federation of Energy Cooperatives, and tried to sort of see whether that would be an interesting idea for them. But the group that I've had most, I guess, joy with is a small group called the Socialist Lawyers Association of Ireland, and I've been in contact with a guy there, and he's been doing some research for me, legal research, and what are the potential legal routes for socialising wind resources in Ireland, because I don't have a legal background, and I can just say, okay, social wind rights would be great, but there's all sorts of potential legal barriers in the way to doing that. But so I think different groups could use it in different ways. Also, even community groups could use, without some sort of legal grounding, they could use this discourse potentially as a way of. So I think there's, and I already have seen, I have seen in recent years a lot of wind rights discourses being used, not specifically in the legal sense, but as a way of sort of saying, we as a nation sometimes, for example, with offshore wind, we should own the resource, we should control it. So a lot of the time it's used in this more, in this sense of democratization of organisation. Yeah. So I framed my research also within this broader notion of the commons and Eleanor Ostrom's work on that and others. So the wind as a commons. Is it treated as a commons? No, that's my argument, but it potentially should be, and that might be better.
So should nature be commons? Is nature a common, and should it be like in general?
Well, I guess there's different ways of looking at it. There's a very analytical way in terms of looking at a specific resource. Oftentimes people frame nature as our global commons, and I would agree with that. I think if you want to look at it more analytically, I guess it makes sense for certain resources to be treated as commons, maybe not all resources. I think it very much depends on the material nature of that resource, I guess.
Commons. I guess with the concept of commons, it's then easy to talk about value of nature, putting economic value on nature. And did you deal with that question, or are you thinking about that question?
That's a good point, and that's something I've been thinking about a lot as well. So when we talk about rent or wind rents, then they are essentially, I would argue, putting a value on nature. So the value that a landowner gets for allowing somebody to access the resource, that's the value, the market value of the wind resource. But then the question is, if you want to treat wind as a commons, does that mean that it should we completely disregard any monetary values? I'm a little bit unsure about that. I think there's different ways of thinking about that. At the end of the day, assigning a monetary value to something is also just an accounting system within society. So if it's democratically controlled, then it's potentially not a problem. But it is also nonetheless reductive to reduce the plurality of values with a certain resource to a number, and I think that creates problems.
So coming from political economy, and having done this research, how do you position your research in transitions studies?
In transition studies, I guess it's a bit difficult. So the theoretical background that I sort of use and that I often think about the world in is probably critical Marxist political economy. That's often how I think about the world, think about problems. And I guess that's been quite underrepresented in transition studies, I would say. I think there's various reasons for that. Although several people have said that it should play a larger role. I would agree with that. Because I think that oftentimes transition studies, they don't really address the sort of fundamental structures or organizational features of the society we live in, i.e. capitalism. And I think that really dealing with this is crucial. And yeah, I guess I would like to see more of that in transition studies. Yeah.
Yeah. I think also as you said, other people also notice that. What do you? Why do you think? Why do you think is it so?
Why is it so?
It's a big question.
Yeah, right. I'm not sure. I guess it's something. I think part of it could be to do with, I suppose, the origins of transition studies. I guess a lot of people might have come from innovation science, engineering, maybe, and maybe these sort of fields don't necessarily ask these deeper questions in a sense. But also, there is just the sense of trying to be realistic or pragmatic, and trying to because obviously changing the global economic system is a lot bigger, is going to take a long time, or is a lot harder of a task than just a transition or an energy transition. It seems a lot more doable, but I think increasingly it's, for me and for a lot of people, it's becoming obvious that the two really go hand in hand, and there's a lot of unintended side effects of energy transitions without thinking of the deeper factors.
Yeah. Well, with your research and similar research, I hope there's more rediscovering of these approaches, and one could definitely, transition studies could definitely benefit from these approaches, and maybe the other way around as well. I don't know.
I think so.
I guess one more question I did want to ask is the difference from the Irish situation and the Dutch situation. What was that? Yeah, in terms of wind.
Yeah, well, I guess both of them showed quite similar features, I would say. So this fragmentation of land ownership with wind rights latched on top of that led to quite similar outcomes in a lot of respects. A lot of distributive conflicts, a lot of procedural conflicts at the community level. But interestingly, there are differences in land ownership systems in both countries. So the Netherlands tends to have quite large sort of high income farms, and also a lot of debt a lot of the time, whereas parts of Ireland specifically have quite small marginal farms. So both countries are dominated essentially by owner-occupied farms, compared to other countries like Scotland, for example, which is really absentee, dominated by large absentee landowners. So both are really owner-occupied farming land ownership systems. But even still, I think the landowners have played a much larger role in the energy transition as active investors in the Netherlands. So even back to the 80s and 90s, landowners were already starting to invest in wind turbines. They haven't done that in Ireland basically at all. And I think that's partially due to the limited means or resources at their disposal in Ireland. But interestingly, the community energy movement is also bigger in the Netherlands, and the landowners, or farmers at least, have sort of teamed up with them in the overarching umbrella group Energy Salmon, which is like the cooperative umbrella organisation. So I think that was quite an interesting development, whereas in Ireland it seems to me at least that oftentimes farmers or landowners and community groups are often at odds. They see each other as competing, because farmers say, or landowners say, why should I give over my land or allow somebody else to tell me what to do with my land, or give people or share the rents, for example. And communities say, this person with all this land is just having this unfair advantage. So I guess that was an interesting difference.
Interesting. I didn't well, I know that there's a lot of conflict in the Netherlands with the farmers, but that part of it, the wind, was very concealed, at least for me.
Yeah.
I guess I had another part of questions that I wanted to ask is kind of a bit personal, but basically it's about what have you learned in the process of you've been in academia for and more years. What has your work taught you about yourself?
About myself? Well, I guess one of the main learnings I had was I struggled a lot in my first year of my PhD, doing a lot of reading. I'm really into theory, social theory, so I enjoy reading a lot, and at a certain point in time I was just so stressed about not being able to decide on a topic or really put these big theoretical ideas into practice, that like the stress just overcame me and I just said, okay, I just need to just choose something and do it. And I think that also that experience really helped me sort of regulate my life a lot better, because I know I'm a lot more, I think I have a lot healthier habits in terms of working hours, and I don't work weekends most of the time, and which a lot of academics do. I see that even with more senior academics, people work a lot in this field, and I don't think it's very healthy really.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, this concept of like overworking as a status symbol almost. Like you are, you tell everybody that you're overworking.
Yeah.
You're working on weekends and so.
Yeah. And then it just ramps up the pressure on everyone else, right? Because people hear that and they feel, oh, I should be working weekends too, and it just creates this vicious cycle, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so being decisive about this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a very decisive person, but I think that that was something that I learned. To put into practice at least.
Yeah, I also recognize that about myself as well. So much, but then you have to go through something. Yeah,
exactly.
And then about so you've worked in Ireland. You've done your PhD in Ireland.
In
right?
Belfast, yeah, Northern Ireland.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's and then now you work in Netherlands. And bearing that in mind, those two things, what have you learned about working in academia actually in these two countries?
Yeah, I've been trying to think about that since moving here, and yeah, it's hard to draw general conclusions, of course, but my experience in the Netherlands so far has been that academia is really well funded, at least at the present moment, compared to the UK, and this creates a certain sense, at least more of a sense of security. I think not for everyone, of course, and there's still a lot of temporary contracts and stuff like that, but I think something that I potentially also have noticed is there's more of a sense of a sort of publication race potentially in the Netherlands, or at least I didn't notice that as much in Queen's University in Belfast. I think there was a bit more still of a substantive focus of research, a little bit more, a bit more grounded, I would say. In the Netherlands, it seems like there's a lot of transitions research, and a lot of it is, just creating new frameworks or new reconceptualizations or categorizations. And I love like conceptual thinking, but at a certain point, it becomes a little bit meaningless, I think. But they are highly cited and these things, and I don't know if that's a true reflection or interpretation, but that's maybe
everyone
something.
has to have their own like toothbrush.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Good. Yeah, that's good. Hopefully we'll hear more about your work in Eindhoven and elsewhere as well.
Okay.
So thanks a lot, Robert, and as I said, looking forward to your further work and see you in Eindhoven.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah.